Welcome to another episode of SparkCom, Spark Partners video podcast. How are you doing today, Adam?
I'm doing great. How about you, Manny?
Excellent, excellent. Lots of things going on in the world, and we've been getting some very good feedback on our talks. Very engaging. People are taking lots of value from them, and so I'm glad to hear that. One of the things I wanted to talk about today, so we've got lots of things going on. I mentioned last show that we have a surprise, if you will. One of the things we're going to be doing is we're going to be interviewing and featuring maybe once a month a talk or conversation with an innovative business leader. And there's a couple right now that we have in mind that have agreed to be part of the show. Adam, you want to talk about Michael just for a few minutes, a minute or two, and give his background and get people excited about that?
Yeah, I think people are going to enjoy hearing from Michael Houlihan. He was an accountant in Napa, California, when his client had an accounts receivable and with a winery, and the winery went bankrupt. And so his client ended up with a giant vat of wine. And what are we going to do with this wine? And nobody had a clue. And so necessity being the mother of invention, it pulled Michael into the wine business. And eventually he became the founder. That vat of wine became the beginnings of what we know now today as Barefoot Wines. And so that was the journey he took. And we're going to talk about some of the necessities that led to his innovations.
Nice.
as a small entrepreneur in building his company. That's
awesome. And then we have another gentleman named Phil Abram. Phil was the CEO of Sonos, the speaker manufacturer, and it was also the chief infotainment officer at General Motors, and was responsible for bringing in and sort of having a very innovative way of retooling OnStar, which is of course the platform for GM vehicles to communicate to the mothership. And so it's going to be a couple of very exciting shows. And that kind of brings me to the topic for today. It has to do with the perceived value from both ends of a company, how they see themselves and how others see them. And then there's kind of a third perception of what is their true value. And we talked about this earlier, Adam, and maybe you can go into a little bit of a deep dive of that value statement, and then give an example of a company that you can see that has taken advantage of that.
Well, I think what people forget is that you only exist to deliver value to your customer. So that's your value proposition, right? So it's what the customer says you do for them. It's not what you do. It's what the customer says you do that's valuable. So take, for example, somebody that's running a restaurant. You could easily fall into the trap saying, well, what I do is I cook food. Well, food is just one of the things that a customer would perceive as being valuable inside of a restaurant, right? So what happens is we tend to get stuck thinking about how we deliver value, and we tend to start describing our business all around that delivery mechanism. And then we can lose sight of what we really do that the customer values. When you can focus on what the customer values and you have that squarely in your sights, you're much more likely to be successful.
That's very interesting. Maybe give an example of something that a company where you've seen a shift from their internal value of what they think they do for the customer to what the customer thinks they do, and then maybe to the next level of sort of looking at attaching themselves to one of these trends we're talking about in that same framework.
Sure. Let me give you a quick one. I had a client that I work with, and the CEO said that what we do is we print dog food bags, right? And so he had a printing press, and the primary customer base were people that sold dog food, so he printed dog food bags. It was a terrible business in that the margins were awful, and he was constantly being pitted against other people. And he said there was no way out. And so the longer I worked with him, the more I got him to realize, and we started focusing, what is the value that the customer gets? Well, the customer wants to sell dog food. That's what they want to do, right? And the bag is part of selling dog food. And so you could view it as, well, we print to the customer specification. What you're doing is you're not giving much value to the customer. You're just printing. But if you said, we're going to help you sell dog food, by making a better bag. We'll come up with ideas for ways in which you could sell more dog food by, different bag sizes, different bag material, different colors, different, actually what you even put on the bag, all the way from, pictures of winners of dog shows to local information about rescue societies and things like that. Now what's happening is you're creating the bag as a point of purchase merchandising item, which then helps the customer to sell more dog food. So if you're walking and you say, well, I'll print your bag, and you say, well, how much? If you say, I'm going to help you sell more dog food, oh, that's a whole different conversation, right? It's not how much, it's how do we do that, and what can we get out of it, and what can the gain be? And then if you tie that to like some of the big trends today, like how do I actually get more information, you can start to put QR codes on the bag, and you could start to provide more information to the customer about what's in the dog food, when it was made, the ingredients, location of the ingredients, things like that. And you could also track the dog food and try to see, who was buying it, who my customers are. So now you're starting to get that intelligence piece. It's one of the 4 big trends that we know lead to the greatest success in business today. So it's just one example of, rethinking your business. Do I print dog food bags, or do I help customers sell more dog food? 2 very different statements, and they'll get 2 very different outcomes. Once they shifted their mindset and started doing more to help their customers sell more dog food, they were able to increase the value of that company tenfold. That's one example.
That's a very powerful example. And it kind of brings me to another thought regarding marketing, and that, again, that perceived to themselves versus what their customer believes they do. I think once you capitalize and you understand what your customers believe you deliver, and then you're able to build your brand around that and start to then go after other companies that are seeking that same delivery value, that's when you really see your company go to those next heights.
Right. I mean, I had another company, and what they did was they started out taking over mailrooms for insurance companies. So, what happens is people mailing in all this claim information, doctors mailing it in, hospitals mailing it in, patients mailing it in. So this was a real big hassle for the insurance company. Somebody's got to open the envelope, pull the paper out, scan the paper, archive the piece of paper, take the scan, send it somewhere. Right? And just takes time, and it's not particularly intelligent work. So they started off saying, well, we'll do that. We'll do it in mass. And by doing it in mass, we'll cut your costs. Well, that was okay, but it wasn't a very flourishing business. But then when they started to realize, wait a minute, we now have all this information. We know that, so somebody sends in this information about a claim, well, it has codes. So they started studying the codes. They started saying, well, what happens to this information as it gets into the insurance company? Oh, well, if it's code 1, this happens. If it's code 2, that happens. They said, oh, that's interesting. Well, why couldn't we just take over that workflow and automate it with the computer? And then, by the way, what decisions do you have to make? Is that a yes, no decision? Is it a go forward, stop decision? What are the decisions made? They started saying, well, what's the data that drives the decision? Well, because if we've got the file, we got the form, we got it scanned, why couldn't we take it to the decision? Why couldn't the computer make the decision, right? And so we start seeing what they did was they automated the workflow. And the more they worked on this, they realized that, well, the bane of existence was unstructured data. They said, well, we know enough about what's going on to know what we would expect to be in that unstructured data. Let's look for it. If we find it, great. And that way we remove the need to run this past a human being. And after a couple of years working on it, what they realized was that the real value wasn't opening envelopes. The real value was automating the workflow. It was being an intelligent workflow that handled claims processing much better than the humans did inside of their clients. So that the clients got to the point that they didn't want anything to do with this claims processing. They wanted it all automated by this company that had started off thinking, well, what we're going to do is we're just going to open envelopes. And to be honest, opening envelopes still took about 80% of the manpower in the company. They had a big facility, and they had to have these scanners, and there was just a lot of physical, manual work that it took to get through that part of the process. But the big value add happened after that when they got the stuff into the computer and they could automate the workflow and they could add intelligence to it. Sure. So by adding intelligence to the workflow, they were able to make it much, much more value, and they increased the value of their company sevenfold.
Sevenfold. Yeah, that's remarkable for just re-looking at their business and making a couple of changes, right?
Yeah.
One of the values I think that we deliver to our listeners and our watchers, our viewers, is these real world examples. I think they help to really guide them in thinking about just in general. First of all, the case study themselves is very interesting, but then how you apply it to your own business is also very interesting. So I wanted to spend a few minutes today doing some sort of live case studies of 3 real businesses that are here local in Tucson. And obviously there's businesses all over the world, but these are people that I know, that I frequent these businesses. And I've talked to them about them as well. And it's very interesting. And I want to get your thoughts sort of unscripted here about these different businesses. So the first one is a company that it's called Capture Every Buddy, and Buddy is a pet. And her business has to do with photographing animals and pets for the animal lover, for the family that wants a picture of Rover on their mantle. And as you can imagine, with the pandemic, her business screeched to a halt. Nobody wanted to get involved. Nobody wanted to meet up with her, bring their dog over. So everything stopped. So she asked me, well, how can I be innovative? What can I do? These concepts of disruptive innovation, how do they apply to a small business that's in a small market? So I wanted to throw that out there and get your thoughts on that.
All right. Well, first of all, let's talk about what she actually does for value. Anybody can take a picture of Rover, go down to the local quick shop and get it made into a poster, right? Anybody can do that. So if she says, well, what I do is I take pictures of Rover for you to put on your wall, she's completely missed why her customers call her. Because if that's all they wanted, they got that problem solved. She's doing something over and beyond that picture. She's somehow making that home more comfortable. She's bringing, making that house into a family situation, making it into a home. So now she needs to say, okay, what are we doing? Why does that make people comfortable? What happens? And get to really understand the motivation of the customer. Like, well, your pictures show Rover much more friendly. Or they, what is it about that? And then you can start thinking, well, what could I do that would that would fulfill that value proposition? One thing I've been doing is, I've been taking pictures, and I'm good at taking pictures. Well, that's great. But to be honest, the days when we needed to run down to the Sears store and have a picture of grandma taken to put on the wall are long gone, right? I mean, that's long gone. Yeah. So she really needs to focus in on that value and what she could do to help people enjoy their home more and how she could help them get from here to there. You have some ideas on that?
Yeah. So, if you think about going back to what her customers believe that she's doing, right, is delivering warmth and having Rover be part of that family. I'm just curious if there's anything that she can do with having a more interactive, or she can also put a calendar together. Right. She can do things on social media. I mean, everybody's all about social media posts, these days. Can she help to do a social media blast of these pets? I know that one of the things that she was doing, and we talked about, is she's creating puzzles. She's doing the service. Again, you can all do it yourself, but it's almost like a concierge service of, we want to take Fido's memory, we want to expand it, we want to help it grow, we want to help. So maybe she could offer that. I mean, maybe her value is honoring that memory and placing it in the home, in the hearts. So if Rover was the family dog and the kid went to university, maybe there's something that she can do with that to engage and bring the dog's memory back to the student that left. I don't know. I mean, there's a whole score of things we can talk about, but I think looking at that delivery mechanism is key.
Yeah, as you said, you can take the photograph, you make it into a puzzle. Now the family's interacting, and Rover's part of this interaction, part of the cozy home feeling. So that's an easy one. Now, where else could you go with that? Could you put Rover's image on other things that are used in the house? People don't use a lot of calendars anymore, to be honest. So I'm not sure how big an idea that might be. But could it go into your everyday plasticware? Could she offer something that we take basic utensils that you would use for having breakfast, and you put Rover's picture on them, things like that. But what you said, how do we create a website? in which people interact with their photographs of Rover. Oh, look, here's a picture of Rover in the mud. And then you have everybody sharing pictures of their dogs in the mud, or they have big pictures of puppies playing with children, or they, could you have a website, and if that website exists, could you help your customers perhaps interact with that website, right? Could you provide them a string of regular photographs that they could use to be on that website? Could you interject, there's some of these games today that you can actually put in, I'm trying to remember the right word for it, avatar. You can avatar into the game with pictures of people that you know, right? You can create the avatar. So could she create Rover into avatars that could become part of games that children or adults play, right? So now what she's doing is thinking about what's the value that people were getting from that photograph, and how do I continue to supply that sort of a value to them? And she'll go a lot further, because if she just goes back to thinking, well, the pandemic's going to end and I'm going to start taking pictures again. Again, every year there's fewer people out there with a photo studio taking a photograph, or getting in their van and going somewhere to take a photograph. That is just becoming a smaller and smaller business. And so she needs to be thinking already about where she's going to take her business so that she can thrive, in 2025.
Yeah, indeed. And I think just another level of that is, if you think about what does a pet do for a family? What does a pet do for an individual? It's a companionship. It's warmth. It's, there's all kinds of studies about how it reduces your stress level and all these things. And people that have, that are very pet oriented families, they're all about sharing about Rover and Fluffy, right? They're all, hey, my dog did this, my dog did that, and so forth. So maybe if she retooled her business slightly to be a touch point to all of those things, whether they want to share in something that is, like a phone case, or a puzzle that's interactive, or something that's more social media oriented to share with Johnny, who's at the university, or maybe end of life. There's companies out there that will take Fido's remains and plant them with a tree, right? So she could be a touch point at all these levels and have a concierge website that can aggregate these things and deliver value from cradle to grave.
Right.
I mean, I hate to be morbid, but that's part of the continuum.
Right.
All right, ready for the next one?
Sure.
Okay. The next one is a craft brewery here in Tucson that I enjoy quite a bit, Crooked Tooth. That's the name of the brewery. And Tucson in particular, before the pandemic, had 25 or so active breweries. And that's quite a high number for a city the size of ours, about 1 million people. And what Crooked Tooth had in particular was they had really good sour beers and just a really good ambiance, and family-oriented brewery, and it's a cool place to hang out. Well, now post-pandemic, the cool to hang out place is a little bit more, maybe not as popular, right? Matter of fact, they closed down two months ago, and they're only doing to-go orders. But to-go orders are limited. What else do you think they could do to open their offering? And again, you don't know much about this brewery, so you'll have to kind of you'll have to get out of the box and think about what they can do.
Right. So let's go back to what were they doing when they were successful. And one element of that is, well, we're making some beer. Okay. But that's just one element, right? Now what you just talked about, they have a place where you could sit and you could mingle. You could have experiences and certain kinds of experiences. I don't know what this one particularly focused on in terms of experience, but they should be really thinking about that, because I can sit at home and drink all the craft beer that I want, right? I just got to run down to the liquor store and there's plenty of craft beers that I can select from. If I want to carry out, I can go to a number of craft breweries and just get the beer and take it home and I can consume it. So are they just about the beer? Because if they're just about the beer, then they need to rethink this whole idea and just be about the beer. And then they need to start thinking about their distribution and their fulfillment and their branding and how they're going to get people to really want their beer. And they're going to consume their beer at home or buy it and consume it wherever they go, like on picnics or wherever they happen to go. But if they're beyond the beer, what is that beyond the beer that they're trying to accomplish? And then they can try to say, how do we create that environment? So, for example, if they could say, you belong to the, what was the name of the brewery again?
Crooked Tooth.
You belong to the Crooked Tooth Club, right? And now what happens is we they could set up, a lobby environment where people could have chats, or, people could interact with each other about whatever it was they were interacting about when they were coming into the Crooked Tooth and enjoying a beer there, right? It's a whole thing. Again, back to the idea of creating the real value that you were giving people. And was it the beer? Or was it something else? And if it's something else, tying into that, and start saying, well, maybe what we could do, we should take our beer and we should put it into a van, and we could drive around like these food trucks, and we would be a mobile beer truck. Now, perhaps that's illegal, right? But if it's illegal, go ask permission, try to fight, get a lawyer, see if you could say, well, why couldn't we provide this at a park, where it's safe, where people could consume our beer in an open and outdoor environment, wearing a mask when they're when they're out. So you start to get creative about actually fulfilling the value proposition.
Yeah,
that's the key. And again, if it's all about the beer, though, then they need to just never reopen that area, or keep it very small, make it a tasting room, and then really focus on branding, focus on distribution, fulfillment. And how they're going to try to get people to just consume more and more of their sour beer.
Yep. And I actually just thought about something. So they do actually have a Crooked Tooth Club. It's a mug club. And you got to pay a certain amount of money a year, and then you get discounts and so forth. Then you get your own mug. But they also tried to do a couple of times sort of a Zoom call where everybody got together and was able to enjoy each other's company, because part of the experience of going to Crooked Tooth was mingling with people, friendly people. People brought their dogs. It was like an experience as well as consuming the beer. But the problem with Zoom is it presents some scheduling issues. Okay, we're going to do this Wednesday at 5, and it's a little bit different. But I just thought about something else that might be interesting for them to consider. And I might have mentioned this to you before, something called Discord. Have I mentioned that to you before?
Yeah.
Basically, it's an online chat room kind of thing where you can pop into different rooms and there's video and all that. So I wonder if they could set up a Discord type situation where, one of the things I enjoyed is just popping in to see who's there, right? So if they offered these Discord style chat rooms, if you will, where people could consume their beer together or consume beer in general together, right? And hopefully it's their beer. I wonder if that would be good for them.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly a way to go. But let's think about those 4 big trends that I brought up before. Mobile, right? Mobile is one, gig economy, adding intelligence, and asynchronous behavior. So what's wrong with Zoom? It's not asynchronous. It's a replacement for the traditional meeting. That's why I'm not a big fan of Zoom. That's why I don't own any Zoom stock, is because it doesn't really sit on the trend. All it did was it displaced. We used to go and had to have meetings. We all had to sit in a room and waste our time. Now, instead of sitting in an office wasting our time, we're sitting on Zoom wasting our time. It's not on trend. So on trend is to be asynchronous. So what I do is I take all those people that have those mugs and let's create some games out of it. Get a picture or make videos of yourself filling your mug in interesting places. And you could, who does the best thing with animals? So you get people drinking, filling their mug, drinking while riding horseback or while playing with their dogs, or while at a farm or out in the wild where they saw, a buffalo or a coyote or something, or doing something related to work. Some pictures of them filling a mug, drinking at a computer, or doing some other activity, right? And that becomes asynchronous, and you can post it up onto the site, and then you can have competitions, and you can let members vote for the winning video. Then you have like a vote every month, and the winner gets, a 6-pack or a case or something, gets some beer, right? Obviously, giving their product. Now what happens is you're using the trend, which is to be asynchronous, along with, how do we add some intelligence to this? Now start thinking about that. How would we start to bring people in and offer them insights? Like, when do you drink the beer? Do you drink it for lunch? Do you drink it after work? What's the best time to enjoy this? And then you get people starting saying, well, I never thought about it before, but I started to enjoy my beers now for lunch. Right? And so you start to, again, build into this, well, what's the right time to have one of these Crooked Tooth beers? And what Crooked Tooth beer goes best with this experience?
Yeah.
Right? I find that when I'm hiking, I like this beer because I need to quench my thirst. I find that when I'm sitting doing nothing, I like this beer because I enjoy the taste. And so you see what I'm getting at? And you start to kind of build up this weird database of best application or best use of the beer, right? So
Interesting.
that's getting now into the mindset of that customer that wanted to be a Crooked Tooth customer. They wanted to have a mug. They wanted to drink the beer. They wanted to run into each other. It used to be maybe inside Crooked Tooth, but now we're going to run into each other across the web,
Right.
but keep it asynchronous. That's going to be much more successful.
Interesting. Yeah, I like those thoughts. And it's one of those things that when you're in that industry and you don't know what you don't know, this is part of the value that we deliver with Spark Partners and SparkCom, the community, is changing the mindset of those entrepreneurs and business people. And I think that mindset shift is just critical for the long-term survival of a company. I was going to talk about a third company that's a local restaurant, but I'm going to throw a little bit of a monkey wrench in that. And for whatever reason, and maybe it's because I saw Harley drive by over here, thought about Harley Davidson and where they're at right now and where they're struggling to be relevant anymore. So I want to get your thoughts on that because I know you were a former Harley rider, right?
Oh yeah. I've had motorcycles my whole life.
So you want to talk about Harley Davidson and kind of some of the challenges that they might be facing, that they are facing and might be facing in the future?
Yeah, so again, Harley Davidson was really smart in that they realized that their customer base was about much more than motorcycles, right? Many years ago, 2 decades or more ago, they came to the realization and they made more money in revenues selling jackets and patches and other apparel and accessories than they made selling motorcycles. People that never owned a motorcycle would get a Harley Davidson jacket, a jacket with Harley Davidson wings on the back of it and wear it. So they built a brand, right? They built a brand that was tied to a lifestyle. And it all kind of originated back in the 40s and 50s. And then that lifestyle was a rebel without a cause, but then it became just rebellious. And then it became accountants that just, want to have people think they're rebellious 4 hours on the weekend, right? And it worked. And that was all fine. That was good. But what they didn't realize is that was a lifestyle brand. Lifestyles change. And so you have to do a lot to refresh that. And oftentimes you have to sunset a brand in order to bring out a new brand. So in the case of Harley Davidson, the average buyer of Harley Davidson products now is 58 years old. Their customer base is literally dying. When I say rebel without a cause, I'm hoping that 2/3 of the people that listen to this podcast have no idea what I mean. It was a movie that was so long ago, starring an actor, James Dean, who's been dead for so long that they don't even know what these references are.
Right, exactly.
And that's the problem Harley has, is that they tied to that. Now, interestingly, about 15 years ago, 20 years ago, they had the idea to come out with some new motorcycles to try to capture younger people. And they went to Porsche and they had Porsche design up an engine. And they came out with a much, much better quality motorcycle in terms of how long it would operate without maintenance, a bunch of factors. And the reality was their dealers didn't want to sell it because the dealers were so tied to that customer base. They had these guys that would come in once every month, and they'd just come into the Harley shop. Some of these guys got, like they are today, they had coffee shops, they had places to drink beer, there were congregation points for HOG, Harley Owner Group, right? So the hogs would come into the dealership, drink beer, buy some paraphernalia, take it home. And they're like, we don't want to change. So they in listening to their primary customers, the dealers and the existing customers, Harley never updated its brand. They never updated that image. And so today, they're literally a dying brand because the customer base is dying and their dealers are dying. And, within 10 to 15 years, they just probably won't even be relevant anymore at all to anybody, to any customer group. So we all have to be aware that we have to pay attention to these trends, right? We have to say, what is it that people want? What are they trying to accomplish? Where are they going? And realize that your product, it's not at all clear that your product's going to be around forever. And if you're going to do something with a brand, you've got to keep it aligned with trends or you'll become about as relevant as Sears and Toys R Us, Radio Shack, and Aunt Jemima syrup.
That's a great thought, Adam. You got to remain relevant. I mean, I'm thinking about Ford Motor Company and their decision about a year and a half ago to completely stop selling passenger cars.
Yeah.
Sedans and so forth. And that was a major move that caused some people to really give a slight look at them and saying, what are they doing? They're ruining their brand. But in essence, they're saving their brand, and they're focusing on the F-150, which is, of course, touted as the best-selling vehicle out there. And they're smart about it, and they're going to survive, and they're going to thrive, and they're going to grow to the next level. Who knows where Harley will be in, like you said, in 20 years. So.
Well, Ford's got a big challenge ahead of itself now that it made that decision, because, again, you have to be very, very careful about the data and how you analyze the data. The F-150 is the most profitable product line they have. Trucks are the most profitable products that they have. So they said, look, we're going to invest in trucks, and we're going to keep those customers. And then what happens? Tesla comes out with an electric truck. It doesn't look anything like an F-150. It looks entirely different. And people said, the analysts go, whoa, what is this, right? And the first reaction is, it will never sell. Well, that's what they said about every Tesla vehicle, right? It'll never sell. The little two-person roadster. Nobody wants a two-person roadster, right? Oh, here comes the Model S. Nobody wants to spend $100,000 on an electric car. Every product that Tesla brought out, the traditional analysts naysayed the product, said, let's kill it off. Let's forget about it. They're going nowhere. What's happening today is that the buyers are transitioning. The very few people, not very few, I'm sorry, back up. There are different segments of users for trucks. There are people who have pickup trucks for their work, right? There are people who have pickup trucks because they tow a lot of capacity. There's just people that have pickup trucks, right? So what do you want in a pickup truck? And if Tesla can capture that younger person with this more modern, stylish, fun truck that has different parameters entirely. You know anything about electric vehicles, they have very fast acceleration, quick startup. There's all these benefits that are different than the way we would measure an internal combustion engine vehicle. So now you have to say, okay, Ford, you just threw your lot entirely into pickups. How are you there because you want to defend and extend the F-150? Or are you there because you want to lead in pickups? And if you want to lead in pickups, you better be down the road on an electric pickup. You better be down the road on a very stylish pickup. When Chevy came out with that S series pickup a few years ago, it basically took a Corvette and put a pickup body on it, right? And they sold every single one they made. Now they ended up saying, well, they thought it was a niche product, so they walked away. Oh my gosh, okay, it was wildly profitable, but we're going to walk away because we can't sell enough of them. What's enough of them? We only sell 100,000 a year. Really? So that's your problem, okay? You can only sell 80,000 a year, so you're going to give up on it. That's the problem. Ford's not going to say, who are all these segments? What do they want? High-performance trucks, fun trucks, electric trucks. They better get their minds open in a big way to what it means to be truck-centric.
Exactly. That's a good message to end this call on. I want to thank our viewers and our listeners, and the last piece that you talked about there is really the value that we deliver with Spark Partners, and the course we'll be putting together this summer and releasing this summer really helps you look at that exact thing. You mentioned defend, extend mentality, right? And that's something that'll drive a company south fast.
Yes.
And so I also want to invite folks to join our newsletter and actually engage with us via email and give us your thoughts on these shows. Give us your thoughts on some topics we can address in the future.
Yes.
And we're excited to be part of this community, and we'll continue to discuss cool and relevant topics. So I believe for next Friday, for our next show, we'd like to discuss and maybe have somebody on the show. So we'll talk about this and look forward to everybody next week.
Thanks, Manny. Have a good one.
Thank you, Adam. Appreciate it. Take care.